Here we go, here we go, here we go. Another episode here on Change of Pace Sports. This is the series Grade the Trade. And in this particular episode, we're going to be breaking down the 2022 NBA trade deadline. We're going to break down all 16 trades that occurred. On this, I'm going to give you each team a team grade, and I'm going to give the trade an overall grade, which I'll say again, was the trade necessary? Did the trade help both teams evolve, or could the trade have been better off not done at all? So that's how we're going to grade the overall trade. The team grade, does it benefit the team now, and does it benefit the team in the long-term future? That's how we're going to break down those trades. And again, I'm your host, MCKC. The saying here is objectivity is the only integrity. So we try to break this down with no bias, give it to you the hard facts. So, without ado, we're going to break down the 2022 NBA trade deadline and all the trades that went down. So let's get right into it. Trade number one. We had the New Orleans Pelicans make a deal with the Portland Trailblazers. This trade was centered around star shooting guard for the Portland Trailblazers, CJ McCollum. CJ McCollum is a veteran, 30 years old. He's been in the league for quite a while. He is a 8-year veteran. He's been the backcourt mate of superstar point guard Damian Lillard for the last 8 years in Portland. But Portland looked like they needed to make a change. So in this particular trade, the Portland Trailblazers sent to New Orleans shooting guard CJ McCollum, power forward Nance Jr., and small forward Tony Snell. In return, New Orleans sent to Portland shooting guard Josh Hart, guard Nickeil Alexander-Walker, point guard Todamar Sadamoski, I think I'm saying his name wrong, guard Didi Lozada, and a couple of picks, a protected 2022 first-round pick and 2 second-round future picks. So as we break down this trade, I believe I'll give this entire trade an overall grade of B. This did positively affect both teams. New Orleans with players like Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, Kyra Lewis Jr. This became a very excellent trade for them. As CJ McCollum can't play point guard and he can play shooting guard, he would be an excellent veteran for a very young team that's kind of needed in veteran leadership. Lance Nance would be an excellent role player that plays along with Jackson Hayes and Zion Williamson in the front court. So for New Orleans, it's an excellent trade, and they didn't have to give up, I believe, too much to make this deal happen. For Portland, they're able to bring back a player like Josh Hart, who I feel fits very well into what they're trying to get done over there. Nickeil Alexander-Walker would fill in very well off the bench, as it looks like they're trying to now play Anthony Simons, who's been playing great basketball this year, averaging close to 18 points, 7 assists this year, as he's finally being able to play as CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard have been hurt. Simons has finally got the opportunity to show that he's a young guard that is skilled, that can score, and can also run the point, like CJ, like Damian. And I think because he's a lot younger than CJ McCollum, about 6 years younger than him, they want to go ahead and let Simons get the run and then trade away CJ McCollum and see what happens. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker with a player like him, who's also very young, that can also blossom to a very good young player off the bench or even starting in the long-term future, allow this trade to make sense for the New Orleans Pelicans and for the Portland Trailblazers. Alexander-Walker is actually only 23, so he's still very, very young. So for the New Orleans Pelicans, I gave them a B-, because CJ McCollum still does have a pretty big contract. And for the Portland Trailblazers, I gave them a B- because CJ McCollum is an all-star. Was an all-star level player, and they did not get an all-star level player in return, but they did get very good, very quality basketball players and players with a very good upside. So that's our first trade of the 2020 NBA deadline. Let's move into trade number 2. This was one of the major trades that went down on the trade deadline. This was the Domantas Sabonis trade. Now, Domantas Sabonis is a young budding star, the son of a legendary center, arguably best passing center of all time, Arvydas Sabonis, who played with the Portland Trailblazers in the late 90s. Now, Sabonis is an excellent young player who was just coming into his own But with Indiana struggling this year and not being able to have their best season, only 13th in the East this year when they had ambitions of being a top 6 team in the Eastern Conference, it was time for them to make trades and to get rid of some of their bigger name players. So Sabonis is only 25 years old, but for the year, he was averaging 18.9 points, basically 19 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, and a steal per game. So he was definitely filling up the stat sheet on 58% shooting. He's definitely a budding all-star player. For the Sacramento Kings, who haven't been in the playoffs in years, well over a decade, and have been trying to actually rebuild the situation, it made sense for them to get a player like Sabonis to match with their young star point guard in De'Aaron Fox. Now for the Sacramento Kings, they are also 13th in the West, but they can make a push, possibly getting to the 10th seed. And then when we talk about De'Aaron Fox, he's a 4-year veteran, budding all-star level talent. He, for the year, in 46 games, he's 24 years old, is averaging 21 points, 5 assists, 1 steal, 4 rebounds. But is a very electrifying young point guard in the league, just signed a big contract to stay in Sacramento. So this is how the trade went down. Sacramento sent to Indiana point guard Tyrese Haliburton, who's a very young star player, played in 51 games, 21 years old in his second year, averaging 14.7 assists, 4 rebounds, and almost 2 steals and almost a block with 0.7 blocks per game. He's an excellent two-way young player. A lot of people feel like Sacramento was wrong for giving him up. But also in this trade, Sacramento gave up sharpshooter, shooting guard Buddy Hield, and a power forward rebounder Tristan Thompson. So for Indiana, I give them a B for what they received back for Domantas Sabonis. In a return, Indiana sent to Sacramento power forward Domantas Sabonis, shooting guard Justin Holiday, shooting guard Jeremy Lamb, and a 2027 second round pick. Now, the grade I gave to Sacramento for what they received was a B+. Domantas Sabonis is easily the best player in this trade. He's a big-time player, might actually become an all-star player or a perennial all-star player in the West, playing with a De'Aaron Fox. And they was also able to add Justin Holiday and Jeremy Lamb to replace what they was starting to use Buddy Hield for, which was just a spot of 3-point shooter coming off the bench. Justin Holiday or Jeremy Lamb could easily fulfill that actual role. As far as for now, Indiana, Buddy Hield now slides into be a shooting guard that can start in the backcourt with a Haliburton, or he can move to the 3 and allow Haliburton to be in the backcourt with a Malcolm Brogdon in Indiana. So this overall trade, I gave it a B. This was a trade that benefited both teams, but it wasn't a clean trade in which everybody was able to get what they wanted and everybody was to be happy with what they got. Now, Haliburton is not easily going to be the point guard of the future for Indiana, as Malcolm Brogdon is still there. And Buddy Hield is not easily going to be the starting shooting guard, as you have a rookie, what's the kid name? Durante. Durante is a kid named that the shooting guard that was drafted this year has been playing very well for Indiana. The name slips me right now. Chris Durante. He's actually 24, but he's actually having an excellent rookie season, averaging 13 points, shooting the 3-point ball at a very good clip at 36%, close to 2 threes a game. Now, it gives him a chance to get more minutes and also maybe slide into a position where he learns from Buddy Hield how to be an excellent shooting guard in the NBA. So that was trade number 2. So let's move into trade number 3. This was a 3-team trade involving the Utah Jazz, the Portland Trailblazers again, and the San Antonio Spurs. Now let's get right into what was moved around. So in this trade, the Utah Jazz received guard Nickeil Alexander-Walker that we had spoke about before, who was traded to Portland early in the day. He was then traded over to Utah. We also had small forward Juancho Hernandez. Let me see exactly how his name is spelled here. Yes, Juancho Hernangomez is his name. He's actually the brother of Billy Hernangomez, who was a former Knicks draftee a few years back. The San Antonio Spurs received in this trade point guard Tamaya Satoransky, who was also involved early in the trade with Portland. He was traded from New Orleans to the Portland Trailblazers. He was also traded again, now also to the San Antonio Spurs. Also in this trade, San Antonio received a 2027 second-round pick via the Utah Jazz. Lastly, Portland received in this trade small forward Joe Ingles, who's a veteran wing player but also tore his ACL earlier this year and will be out for the remainder of the 2022 season. Young shooting guard Elijah Hughes, and a 2022 second-round pick. Now, the grades that I delivered for this overall trade grade, I give a C. I feel like none of these trades necessarily were necessary for any of these teams. The only team that really benefited out of these groups was actually the Utah Jazz. Now let's go into the individual teams' grades here. So for the Utah Jazz, I start off and I give the Utah Jazz a B+. Now I think the B+ I give here, they were able to trade away Joe Ingles, who suffered a season-ending knee injury and will be unable to help them in their playoff run, and they were able to replace him with Juancho Hernan-Gomez, who's only 26 years old, plays very similar in terms of skill set to Joe Ingles, and he's a decent defender, good length, and is an excellent three-point shooter. They also was able to add Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who, like we said, is only 23 years old. He's a young budding star potential, very good potential, a quality potential in the NBA, and he can now learn from a player like Mike Conley and Jordan Clarkson with the Utah Jazz and add more depth to the Utah Jazz team for this year. So that's why they get the B+. Now for the San Antonio Spurs, I gave them a C-, because with already some of the players that the San Antonio Spurs have in the backcourt, I don't see Satoransky becoming a huge piece for the rest of the season, so I don't necessarily see why they made that move to add themselves into this trade. But I do feel like adding the second round pick was decent. That's why I gave them a C-. Now Portland, I gave them a C, as Joe Ingles does when he does return next season. His veteran leadership and his ability would actually be an excellent player, an actual quality player to that team when he returns. Elijah Harris is actually a good young player. He's a shooting guard that's a good scorer, that has got a lot of young potential. I think that he was actually a good pickup for the Portland Trailblazers, who had to get rid of a C.J. McCullough, had to give up a Tony Snell, and I think Elijah Hughes replaces those players well in the Portland roster. So that's why I give them a C. So that was trade number 3. Let's go into trade number 4 on the NBA trade deadline. We had a trade between the OKC Thunder and the Miami Heat. Now, the trade that went down here, Miami sent to Oklahoma City small forward KZ Okpala. They might be saying his name wrong, but KZ Okpala or OZ Pala. He played with Miami this season. He's a very young player, only 22 years old. He's a wing player, about 6'8", 6'9". Actually, he's a good offensive player, decent defensive player, has a lot of length. And I feel like for the OKC Thunder, who's used to developing players similar, it's a good pickup for them. And for Miami, it just adds another roster spot. So the overall trade the grade I give for this trade is a C. Miami only received a 2026 second round pick, which is just a future second round pick for him. So OKC didn't have to give up much, and Miami just gave him up to get a roster spot. So overall grade is a C. This trade doesn't really do much for either team, except for OKC to get another young potential player that they can work with and see if they can develop him. And for Miami, they just add another roster spot to maybe add a veteran for a postseason push who could possibly be Goran Dragic, who the rumor is to be waived. He could possibly be returning to the Miami Heat. So that was trade number 4. Now let's move right into trade number 5. This is one of the bigger trades of the trading deadline day. We had the Sacramento Kings, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Detroit Pistons, and the Los Angeles Clippers all involved in a 4-team trade for trade number 5. Now, in this trade, the Sacramento Kings received shooting guard Dante DiVincenzo, power forward Trey Lyles, shooting guard small forward Josh Jackson, and that for them was what they was able to take in this trade. For the Milwaukee Bucks, they was able to receive power forward Serge Ibaka and 2 future second-round picks. For the Detroit Pistons, they received power forward Marvin Bagley. And for the Los Angeles Clippers, they received shooting guard Rodney Hood and small forward Semi Ojeleye. Now, as I break down the grades, the overall grade for this trade was a B+. This is one of the better trades of the entire NBA trade deadline, in my opinion. But beyond my opinion, it actually effectively helped each team that participated in this trade. So let's start right off with the Sacramento Kings and the trade that they was able to make here. Now, for the Sacramento Kings, I gave them a B+ for this trade. I feel like this was an excellent trade for them, even though they lost a very talented young player in Marvin Bagley, who was the second overall pick in the draft a couple years ago in the Luka Doncic draft. And I believe that was 2018. He was the second overall pick in that draft. Marvin Bagley is an extremely talented player, but I feel like it wasn't working out for him in Sacramento. And trading him to Detroit, when Detroit right now has a lot of budding young talent like the fourth overall pick of this past draft and Cade Cunningham. I think Cade Cunningham and Marvin Bagley would be excellent partners as they would develop together, as Marvin Bagley is still only 22 years old as of right now. So he's extremely young, and I feel like that's a good trade for him to Detroit. But why I give Sacramento the B+. Now, Donte DiVincenzo is only 25 years old. He was returning this year from a ACL injury. He's a very good defensive player and a two-way player. But because the Milwaukee Bucks had signed Grayson Allen in the offseason, Grayson Allen has fulfilled that role very well for Milwaukee and has basically replaced DiVincenzo for them. Now, Trey Lyles actually was a former lottery pick. He's an excellent kind of offensive forward, stretch forward in the league. So I feel like he adds excellent depth for the Sacramento Kings after some of the players they've had to give up. And I think he adds as an excellent replacement for Marvin Bagley. What Bagley would have gave, now you could bring in Trey Lyles as a power forward. And also now that you bring in Domantas Sabonis to play power forward, you don't necessarily need a Marvin Bagley at that position. Lyles could just kind of back up Domantas Sabonis. And then lastly, you have shooting guard small forward Josh Jackson, who's a former fourth overall pick of his draft. A very highly touted 5-star All-American young player that has bounced around. He was drafted by Phoenix. Then he got moved to Memphis. He was with Detroit. And he hasn't really been able to find his footing in Sacramento. Maybe he can be able to actually find a home and be able to let that immense talent make sense, as he would be basically replacing Buddy Hield. So it's an excellent pickup for the Sacramento Kings. Now for the Milwaukee Bucks, I gave them a B. The reason I gave them a B is because their center, Brook Lopez, we don't know when he's going to come back. He's dealing with back injuries this year. And what he does is he's a good three-point shooter, and he's an excellent shot blocker at 7 foot tall. Now, that's the exact same skill set that Serge Ibaka brings. He's an excellent long-range shooter, and he's an excellent shot blocker at this point in his career. He's also a veteran. Has actually been in a big-time game. He's been in a lot of playoff games. He's been in the finals with OKC Thunder. So he actually is very much so postseason tested for a team that's trying to defend their NBA championship this year. That's why I give them a B. And the 2 future for second-round picks is also good good haul for giving up a young player like Donte DiVincenzo, who's only 25 years old and very talented young player. Now for Detroit, I gave Detroit an A. This is just a home run trade for them. Only having to give up basically Josh Jackson, who wasn't getting a lot of minutes behind Hamidou Diallo and Cade Cunningham and the other guards that they have in Detroit. It just made sense to go after a player like Marvin Bagley, very young, only 22, that can actually now develop with their number 1 overall pick in Cade Cunningham. So I gave this an A. And then now the Los Angeles Clippers, I gave them a B-, because now Rodney Hood adds excellent depth for that team as they try to make it into the playoffs as a nice offensive weapon off the bench. And then you add Semi Ojeleye, who's also, again, a veteran defensive player that can add excellent depth off the bench for them. So I gave them a B-. And overall trade grade, I gave us a B+. 4 teams involved. All 4 teams benefited from this trade. Good trade. Good trade. Now, that was trade number 5. Let's move into trade number 6. In trade number 6, we had the San Antonio Spurs and the Toronto Raptors involved here. So, in this trade, the San Antonio Spurs sent to Toronto power forward Thaddeus Young, who's a veteran in this league, and power forward Drew Eubanks. But Drew Eubanks was waived immediately by the Toronto Raptors. But let's focus on Thaddeus Young, who has been in the league for quite a while. He's a veteran player. And in return, Toronto sent point guard Goran Dragic, who's expected to be bought out by the San Antonio Spurs, and a 2022 protected first-round pick. So this trade, I gave an overall trade grade of B, as both teams were able to make beneficial moves for each other or for both teams. So let's get right into the San Antonio Spurs. I gave the Spurs a B- for this trade, because it's at its face, getting Goran Dragic is not bad, but then to buy him out, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to give up a young player like Drew Eubanks, who was playing sparingly, not a lot of minutes, but he was a young developing player with the Spurs, and he was only 24 years old and played 49 games with them this year. So they did give up a young player that they was playing and developing and trying to develop in this trade. So that's why I give them the B-. Now for the Toronto Raptors, I gave them a B+, because Goran Dragic essentially wasn't playing at all for them. He was basically going to get bought out by them. So for them to be able to trade him and get a veteran player, and Thaddeus Young, who's a veteran player in this league that fits right into what they do. He's a long player that has a excellent wingspan. He's a player that's been in playoff games, has played in big games before. He's a good passer. He's a team first player. He fits very well with what the Toronto Raptors have and what the Toronto Raptors are trying to do. He's actually a 14-year NBA veteran at this point. So the Toronto Raptors, I gave them a B+. They expected to waive Drew Eubanks to open up that space, and they still was able to get a 2022 second-round pick. So that was a sixth trade, NBA trade deadline 2022. So now trade number 7. This was the biggest trade of the day. This trade was rumored for weeks. This was actually an excellent trade. And this is actually going to take a few minutes for us to break this down. We might even turn this into a clip, because this is a big time trade right here, and it's a big breakdown we're about to get into here. So now trade number 7 of the NBA trade deadline 2022. We had the James Harden Ben Simmons trade. This trade involved the Brooklyn Nets and the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, we know that Ben Simmons has not played all season for the Philadelphia 76ers. He's demanded a trade. He was very upset by the way the organization, specifically Doc Rivers and Joel Embiid, spoke about him after they lost in the playoffs last year. So they had to move Ben Simmons, but GM of the Philadelphia 76ers, Daryl Moore, was basically saying that he was not going to move Ben Simmons just because Ben Simmons wanted to be moved. But it's also known that Daryl Moore, who was a former GM of the Houston Rockets for close to the last 10 years, he wanted to bring in his former franchise player with the Houston Rockets, James Harden. Now, all of a sudden, James Harden wanted out of Brooklyn, because Brooklyn wasn't sure that they would have their big three together for the entire playoffs, with Kyrie Irving's vaccination status up in the air. So let's get into what this trade became. So now, Brooklyn Nets sent to Philadelphia shooting guard James Harden and veteran power forward Paul Millsap. And in return, the Brooklyn received power forward point guard Ben Simmons, shooting guard Seth Curry, center Andre Drummond, 2022 first round pick, 2027 first round pick. So the overall trade I gave to this trade was an A-. The reason I gave this an A- because it wasn't a perfect trade across the board for both teams, but this was damn near a perfect trade. So let's get into the actual particulars of each team. So now I gave the Philadelphia 76ers an A grade. Now they were able to get the shooting guard that now was going to act as the point guard and the shooting guard and the dominant closing scorer for the Philadelphia sector that Joel Embiid has needed ever since he's kind of been a star center in the league and he's developed as a star center. Joel Embiid right now leads the league in scoring, but James Harden is one of the top assist men in the entire league and has also led the league in scoring very recently. So now pairing James Harden with Joel Embiid instantly now makes the Philadelphia 76ers a title contender and the fact that Philadelphia didn't have to trade all defensive player Matisse Thybulle or have to trade budding young point guard Tyrese Maxey, it's became the perfect trade for the Philadelphia 76ers. So now their starting lineups looks like Tyrese Maxey at the point guard, James Harden at the shooting guard. You have Matisse Thybulle at the 3, at a small forward. You would have Tobias Harris at the 4, and then you have Joel Embiid at the center. That kind of starting lineup, or that kind of team, just has so much power, and it's just well balanced. It's just very well balanced, and that makes Philadelphia now a legitimate title contender in the Eastern Conference. But now let's also look at the Brooklyn Nets now. I gave the Brooklyn Nets a grade of an A also. Now, for the Brooklyn Nets, this also makes the Brooklyn Nets an immediately title contender and possibly a dynasty. If this trade now works out for Brooklyn, this potentially makes Brooklyn the team to be in the East for the next 3 to 5 years. Easily. So now Ben Simmons is arguably one of the top 3 defensive players in the entire league, and he also presents a length problem for the rest of the league. Ben Simmons is 6'11", and now you have Kevin Durant at 6'11". So having the two of those players and that kind of length on the floor, that both can handle the ball, both can get to the rim, and now you have Kevin Durant can now spread the floor for Ben Simmons. That's a great passer. It makes the Brooklyn team just a very deadly team on both sides of the ball, especially on offense. And now on defense, they just become an elite defensive team. And now you add in, if Kyrie Irving becomes a full-time player, if the vaccination status changes in New York City, it becomes extremely hard for any team to match up with the Brooklyn Nets on the offense and the defensive side of the ball in any 7 games or any game to begin with. So for the Nets, this is a home run kind of pick. They add Andre Drummond, who's one of the best rebounders in the entire league. So they get one of the best rebounders, they get one of the best defensive players, and one of the best passers in Ben Simmons. And they also add, Seth Curry, who's one of the better shooters to go with a range of shooters that they have around with Cam Thomas, Patty Mills, and Joe Harris to go around Ben Simmons and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. So this was a home run trade, one of the best trades we've seen in a few years, and this should definitely positively affect both of these teams and make the East that much more lethal going forward. So that was trade number 7. Let's move into trade number 8. This was sneakily one of the better trades of the day. This was just a great trade on both sides for both teams, and we're going to get into this. Is trade number 8. We had the Boston Celtics and the San Antonio Spurs involved. So in this trade, the Boston Celtics sent to San Antonio shooting guard Josh Richardson, shooting guard Romeo Langford, a 2022 first-round pick, and a 2028 first-round pick swap, which is the right to swap picks. In return, the San Antonio Spurs sent point guard, shooting guard Derek White. Okay, now I gave this trade an overall grade of an A. I felt like this trade completely benefited both teams. This was a great trade for both teams. For the San Antonio Spurs, I gave them an A- because in the end, they gave up Derek White and they didn't exactly get a player that would actually fulfill Derek White's role in this trade. Now, Josh Richardson and Romeo Langford are excellent shooting guards, excellent wings, but the San Antonio Spurs already have a gluttony of shooting guards right now that they're actually playing and developing with players like Lonnie Walker, Joshua Primo, and Tyler Johnson. So they have already quite a few shooting guards already. Devin Vassell. They already have quite a few wing players at that position. Young players like Vassell is 21, Lonnie Walker is 23. DeJounte Murray is still 25. Trey Jones is only 22. Joshua Primo is only 19. So they're all very young players that they have there that they're going to bring in now to actually compete against them for those minutes. So I don't exactly agree with that trade or that part of the trade. But again, Josh Richardson is still a very good player. He can actually be a nice mentor for these young players that we talk about. As far as for the Boston Celtics, Adding Derek White was just an excellent trade. Excellent trade for the Boston Celtics. He's basically a two-way player, and he can play both guard positions. He's played in over there with San Antonio, so he's played in very important games. He's played in postseason games. He's a very smart basketball player. He'll instantly be able to help the Boston Celtics as they try to actually creep up in the Eastern Conference and go up further to be higher than the sixth seed. They're the sixth seed right now in the East. He fits very well with other players they have there, like Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown. So I thought that was an excellent trade. Derek White is 27, which is the exact same age as Marcus Smart. I think the two of them on the court together makes this an elite perimeter defensive team that also on the other side can actually shoot the three and pass the ball and play off each other very well. So for the Boston Celtics, I gave this an A- also. So this is an A trade, and this was trade number 8. Let's move quickly into trade number 9. Now this trade involved the Phoenix Suns and the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers was very active on this day. So for this trade, Phoenix sent young center power forward Jalen Smith to the Indiana Pacers and a 2022 second round pick. In return, Phoenix sent to Indiana Indiana sent to Phoenix small forward Torrey Craig. Now, for the Indiana, I gave this a A-. Adding Jalen Smith was an excellent pickup when they just lost Domantas Sabonis. Now, Jalen Smith is a young, budding big man. He's only 21 years old, but he can shoot the three. He's an excellent rim protector, excellent defensive player. He's a very similar player to Miles Turner, and I feel the two of them would actually be an excellent front court matchup. You can actually back up Miles Turner. You can play them together. But he's an excellent replacement for the losing of Domantas Sabonis. So for Indiana, I gave them an A-. And then getting rid of Torrey Craig, which just allows them to play a lot of their young wing players that they have now, which is an excellent move. Now for Phoenix, I see why they went and got Torrey Craig. It just gives them some more depth with players like Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, Cam Johnson. It gives them more depth on their wing positions. Adele Nader. It gives them more depth with the injuries that they've been able to have. And he's actually played with them before. He's actually played on that system before, so he knows what it takes. And he's a good depth piece. So I gave them a C+. But overall, it wasn't a great trade for both teams, so I just gave the overall trade a C+. That was trade number 9. Moving into trade number 10. This overall trade I gave a C+. This trade involved the Charlotte Hornets and the Washington Wizards. Now, the reason I gave this overall trade of a C+, it only really benefited one team and one team strongly. Now, the Washington Wizards sent to Charlotte power forward Montrezl Harrell. Now, Montrezl Harrell is a veteran, former 6th Man of the Year award winner, and he was just signed to Washington for a nice contract in the offseason. So to trade him now, it was a very interesting move, but it's a great pickup for the Charlotte Hornets. As they're making a push to be a playoff team this year, they're having an excellent year with their young stars, LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges. He's an excellent pickup, and with LaMelo Ball being a great point guard that's being able to pass and run the pick and roll well, Montrezl Harrell is one of the best pick and roll bigs in the entire league. So this was just a great matchup, a great trade for Charlotte. Great job by Mitch Kupchak of the Charlotte Hornet front office. Now for Washington, they received point guard Ish Smith and center Vernon Carney. Now Vernon Carney is a younger player in the league. He's a center. But I feel like, again, this wasn't a great move for Washington because they just had center Thomas Bryant come back. They have players like Rui Hachimura and Kyle Kuzma that play the front court. So I'm not exactly sure when he's going to be able to develop and get the minutes needed. And with Ralph Nader there, Ish Smith might not make much of a difference there. So for Washington, I gave this a D+. That's the grade. I gave them a D+. And for Charlotte, I gave them an A-. And that was trade number 10. So moving right along, we had trade number 11, and this involved the Phoenix Suns and also the Washington Wizards. This trade I gave the overall grade of a D. This was another trade in which Washington made that didn't really benefit them in the now and here and we're not sure exactly how it benefits them in the future. So let's go ahead. Washington sent to Phoenix point guard Aaron Holiday. And in return, Phoenix sent to Washington cash considerations. So Washington was able to get some cash out of this particular deal. And Phoenix was able to add more depth to their bench in adding young point guard Aaron Holiday, who's only 25 years old. He's now in his third year. He was drafted by Indiana. In his first 2 years, he wasn't able to really play in Indiana behind players like Malcolm Brogdon. So he and Caris LeVert. So he is signed with Washington in the offseason thinking he would get a chance to play, but was unable to play behind Spencer Dinwiddie. So now Washington has kind of gave up on the experiment or trying to develop Aaron Holiday, and they've traded Aaron Holiday to Phoenix. So that's why I don't really see this as a good trade at all, and I don't see it as a good trade for Washington because it's really they gave up on a player that they just signed in the offseason that's only 25 years old. And is only in his third season. I'm not exactly sure why they didn't give him a chance when they did trade Spencer Dinwiddie. So it would make sense of now giving Aaron Holiday those minutes. But for Phoenix, with Cameron Payne already there and Alfred Payton, it's going to be hard pressed to see that Aaron Holiday is going to play behind that depth and with already starting point guard Chris Paul. So I'm not exactly sure when Aaron Holiday is going to play and how much depth he gives them. So that's why this trade, overall grade, I give this a D. So moving right along into trade number 12. Now, trade number 12 was probably the third biggest trade of the entire trade deadline day. And this trade involved a big star that looked like he was going to be a superstar in this league, but the injuries have kind of slowed him down. So this trade involved former Knicks young star and former Dallas star now, Kristaps Porzingis. In this trade, we had the Dallas Mavericks and the Washington Wizards. So Dallas sent Kristaps Porzingis to the Washington Wizards and also a second-round pick. In return, Dallas received point guard Spencer Dinwiddie and power forward Davis Bertans. Now, this trade, overall grade, I gave it an A. I think this trade was a home run. It seems like that Porzingis wasn't happy with his role in Dallas, and I feel like the fit for him in Washington is actually a very good fit. I feel like he would be an excellent partner alongside Bradley Beal. Where Bradley Beal is a franchise player that doesn't mind sharing the limelight with another star. He shared it with John Wall. Then he shared it with Russell Westbrook. And I think Kristaps Porzingis at this point in his career, he wants to be treated more like a star. He wants to be embraced more like an all-star for his potential to finally come out. So I think that the relationship or the potential combination of him and Bradley Beal in Washington, I think, is actually a good fit for Kristaps Porzingis. And for Dallas, I think adding a player like Davis Bertans, he basically will replace what Kristaps Porzingis was. Bertans is a 6'10", long-range shooter that can shoot the ball very well, can put the ball on the floor and actually score a little bit. So I think he would now replace what they were doing with Kristaps Porzingis, which is treating him as more or less a 3-and-D big man that could play a little bit of defense and spread the court. Bertans is not a great defender, but he is a very good shooter, and he can shoot off the ball well from a Luka Doncic and spread the floor well for a Luka Doncic, which they were really treating Porzingis as. So I feel for Dallas, that's an A-. For Washington, I give it a B because at the end of the day, we're not even sure if Porzingis is ever going to be healthy again and reach that potential. And they just signed Spencer Dinwiddie to a 4-year contract, and in less than half a season, they're already trading Spencer Dinwiddie. So that trade is still very questionable for why Washington is making that kind of move. That's why we're giving them a B. But overall, this is an excellent trade for both teams involved. That's trade number 12. Moving right along to trade number 13. This involved the two teams of the Houston Rockets and the Boston Celtics. Now, this trade I gave an overall grade of a C. Now, Houston sent to the Boston Celtics power forward center Daniel Theis. And in return, Boston sent to Houston point guard Dennis Schroeder, center Enes Freedom, who was waived, and power forward Bruno Fernando. Now, the reason I give this trade a C is because I feel like this was a horrible trade for the Houston Rockets. I gave the Houston Rockets a D. By adding point guard Dennis Schroeder, I'm not exactly sure why. They already had John Wall not playing over there. They didn't really need an additional point guard. I can see why, because they basically had Kevin Porter Jr. playing the point guard, and they had and Amani Brooks coming off the bench. So I can see why they felt the need to probably add a little bit of point guard depth. But I don't see why they also went after Bruno Fernando when they already had several power forwards over there. With Kenyon Martin Jr., Christian Wood, David Nwaba, Alfred Sengun. So it's like they already had a set of power forwards. So to add Bruno Fernando, who's a young player that would probably need some time to play. He's only in his second year in the league. He's still a very young player. But on the other side, I thought Boston, I gave Boston a grade of a B. Daniel Theis played for Boston for several years, and he adds excellent depth for the Boston Celtics in replacing Enes Kanter, who's playing not so much, but not a lot of minutes, and Bruno Fernando, who wasn't playing that much, not a lot of minutes. Theis now jumps right in. He adds them excellent depth, can play 20 minutes off the bench for them, or he could even start, and can actually give them basically a 3-and-D big. He plays defense and can spread the floor and shoot the three-pointer. So this was a solid trade for the Boston Celtics, as they made great trades to strengthen themselves for the playoff run. So that was trade number 13, overall grade of a C. Moving into trade number 14. This involved the Orlando Magic and also the Boston Celtics. So now the Boston Celtics sent a player that they just picked up a few weeks ago in a trade, in center Bol Bol, point guard PJ Dozier, and a second round pick, along with cash considerations to the Orlando Magic. And in return, they just got a 2023 second round pick. So I gave this overall trade a C. I gave the Boston Celtics a C for this trade, but I gave the Orlando Magic an A-. Now the reason I gave the Orlando Magic A-, Bol Bol to me is still a top 5 talent from his draft class. And if anybody's able to ever tap into his immense potential as virtually a Kristaps Porzingis type of player, with a lineage as his father being Manute Bol, one of the first 3-and-D centers in the league, and a big 7'5" player. I think Bol Bol has immense talent, playing along a player like Mo Bamba, and the talent that they have in Orlando that they're building. I think he can actually be an excellent pickup. So for Orlando, I think this could potentially be a great trade, potentially. But at its face, we're just not sure. And for the Celtics to give up on a player like Bol Bol when they just traded for him a couple months ago, I cannot see this as a good trade. And also only getting a second round pick while giving up that much potential talent, and also giving up a second round pick, I can only give them a C for this. Not a great trade. So moving right along, we go into trade number 15 of the trading deadline for 2022 in the NBA. Trade number 15 involved the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Indiana Pacers. Now this trade happened right before the actual trade deadline. This was, I believe, happened on the Wednesday before the Thursday. This trade also involved the Indiana Pacers, who made a lot of moves, got rid of a lot of their talented players. So Indiana traded to Cleveland shooting guard Caris LeVert, who was again a young star player that just got traded from the Brooklyn Nets to the Houston the James Harden trade last year. He was a young player that's been coming up, but he makes a lot of sense for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And they also received a 2022 second round pick via Miami from the Indiana Pacers. In return, Cleveland sent to Indiana point guard Ricky Rubio, who recently tore his ACL and is out for the rest of the season, but was having a very good season. A 2022 first round pick and 2 2022 second round picks. Now, the overall grade I gave for this was a C+. The grade I gave to Cleveland was a B+. Now, adding a young budding star like Caris LeVert at the shooting guard position, 6'6" guard, in his 5th year in the league, at the age of only 27 years old, just entering his prime, I thought this was just a great trade. It goes along with the young talent that Cleveland already have over there, like Darius Garland, Isaac Okoro, Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley, the young rookie this year. When you think about those kind of young talents that they have over there, he fits right in. And if Colin Sexton, who tore his LCL this year, was also a young talent they have, only 23 years old, was a lottery pick a few years ago, is only in, I believe, his fourth year when he had got injured this year. I feel like they've become a very talented team, and they've overachieved this year. They're third in the East right now, 35-22. So it's like they're doing very well. They're playing very good ball under head coach JB Bickerstaff. So I feel like this trade was just a home run trade for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I gave it a B plus, but losing Ricky Rubio, who was having a great year and was fitting in very well with the Cleveland Cavaliers system, and was being a very good mentor coming off the bench with Darius Garland. He in 34 games, 28 minutes, was averaging 13 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds, which were just great numbers for a bench player coming off the bench and giving them that kind of minutes. So for Indiana, going forward, I gave them a C because, again, Ricky Rubio is out for the rest of the year. They really are just punting on this year in this trade and just assuming that they're going to get some play out of Ricky Rubio when he returns next year. But they was always able to get a 2022 first-round pick off of trading Caris LeVert. But I felt the kind of player that Caris LeVert was, unless you're getting several first-round picks or a talent comparable to him, a young player that you can see developing, I don't thought this was a good trade for the Indiana Pacers, and that's why I only gave them a grade of a C. Okay. Moving into the last trade of the NBA trading deadline as we completely break down the 2022 trading deadline. Trade number 16 involved the Los Angeles Clippers and the Portland Trailblazers. This was the first trade to kick off the trading deadline. This was early in the week. This was Tuesday, but this was the first trade that we had. Now, the Clippers sent to Portland point guard Eric Bledsoe, small forward Justice Winslow, and small forward Keon Johnson, along with a 2025 second round pick. In return, the Los Angeles Clippers received shooting guard Norman Powell and power forward Robert Covington. Now, I gave this overall trade a B minus. It was a good trade for both teams, not a great trade. Now, I start with the Clippers. The Clippers, actually, I gave them a grade of a B plus. This was an excellent trade for them. Replacing basically Eric Bledsoe with Norman Powell. Norman Powell could play both guard positions, but he's a lethal scorer. He basically gives them a lethal scorer off the bench and gives them just way more depth for what the Clippers have going into the postseason and going into a postseason run when they're not sure if Kawhi Leonard will return back this year for them. Now, in terms of adding also Robert Covington, he replaces Serge Ibaka very well, because Covington, again, is an excellent defensive player. He has great length. He actually blocks shots. He gets good steals, and he shoots the ball well from long range. He's an excellent 3-and-D, basically big, or wing big, so to speak. So he replaces Serge Ibaka very well. So I give them a B plus for that move. And for Portland, I give them a C plus, because Bledsoe now becomes just another point guard that will kind of clutter what they already have, again, with Damian Lillard, Anthony Simons, Dennis Smith. They already have quite a few guards already over there in point guard. So bringing in Bledsoe, I see where he fits, but it's still going to be a tough kind of fit. Justice Winslow is an excellent pickup because I feel like he might be able to find his potential or be a better fit in Portland under a head coach like Chauncey Billups. And I do like the addition of Keon Johnson. He was a lottery pick in his past draft. He's extremely young. I feel like he might be able to actually be able to find his footing in Portland, and after he's able to settle in Portland. He's an excellent wing player, good size, young player. We'll see what he'll be able to bring to the Portland Trailblazers. So I gave them a C plus for this particular move. And that will be now my breakdown of the 2022 NBA trade deadline. We went through all 16 trades. So if you have any comments, leave it in there. If you believe that I was wrong about anything, or if you feel like, I was wrong about your team, or you're wrong about the grade that I gave your team, or the grade that I gave to any of these trades, leave it in the comment section. If you like my breakdown, leave a like, subscribe. We're going to continue to actually break down more trades, more moves in the sports world, and more objective takes, and break down the facts, the more objective takes in the sports analyst world. This again is Change of Pace Sports. I'm your host, MCKC. And again, objectivity is the only integrity in the sport journalist world. Till next time, peace.